I just wanted to go over a couple of things with you guys. We will be recording the webinar, and this is the second in the series of 3. I want to let everybody know that Christy Murphy is our State Unit on Aging lead person for the Gatekeeper program. So if you have questions, you can certainly email myself, but you can also email Christy, who is actually the lead person. I'm involved with the training piece, but she's involved with the Gatekeeper rollout as a bigger picture, the whole thing. I'm here with Paul Ayarabino and Lynn Shemer-Valliere. I'll get that right by the third one. And they're going to talk here in just another minute or so. But we wanted again to remind you guys that the State Unit on Aging has contracted with these folks from Multnomah County to help us out. And that's why they're doing the training and the webinars, and they're posting materials on the website for you guys to get on and look at. And then when the series is all over, you'll each get a little bit of time individually with them to be able to talk to them about your specific plans. So a little TA consulting time. Right now you guys should be working on your work plans and your budgets and your timelines and those kinds of things, and hopefully after today you'll be a little bit more able to do that. We did post the recording and the materials on the State Unit on Aging page after the last one, and we will do that again after today. Please text chat your questions to us. We'll keep an eye out. If you happen to be in a group that's doing a group presentation, you're listening to us as a group, please let us know who else is there with you. We really appreciate those of you who answered the survey last time, the evaluation survey, and let us know what you thought. We will send one out again today, so watch for it shortly after the webinar. That information was very useful to us. Thanks. I do want to remind you again that we have already posted on the RTZ system quick little webinars on how to record Gatekeeper calls and then how to pull reports of those Gatekeeper calls if you've recorded them in the right way. So I'm not seeing any particular questions. I believe that we are going to, looks like we've got almost everybody on board here, so I'm going to turn it over to Lynn and Paul and let them get going. That's who they are. They're here with me right now. You can have a picture of them in your mind.
Great. Thanks, Sue Ann. Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Arabino, and before I get started with the slide, I just wanted to kind of put things in context this morning. First, as Sue Ann pointed out, this is webinar 2 of 3. So the first webinar, hopefully all of you had a chance to be part of that, or we'll review it later. That was focusing primarily on the foundation of the Gatekeeper program and a lot of the whys, if you will, like why this program, why is it a best practice, why do this program. The focus today is more on the nuts and bolts of the Gatekeeper program, so it's the how to do this in our community. And we're going to provide a lot of hands-on information. And the theme also for today is what we're calling Plan, Do, Study, Act, and you'll see that throughout the presentation. Because just like any other program, you really need to kind of try something. You're going to be working with groups of advisory councils. You'll plan something, you'll do it. Then you'll study it and say it's working or it's not working. And if it's not working, how do we make it different? So I think that gives you a little margin for safety. So you try something and then you have the ability to change it over time. I also want to point out, as Sue mentioned, there are some materials on the SUA website. So right now we have 2 things up there, the replication guide as well as a document called What's Working, which focuses on a lot of the best practices. We'll be referencing a lot of different documents today, like memos of understanding, some promotional materials, job descriptions, etc. We're working with Christy Murphy from the state, and we're hoping to have that on the website sometime next week, probably mid to late week next week. So don't panic if you see on the screenshot, because it's not really the full document. We will be getting that for you, and it'll be on the State Unit on Aging website. So that's just sort of a little preview. So we're going to start this morning with some of this will be a little bit of a review from our last webinar, which is reviewing that checklist for a work plan. So again, just as a mini review from last time, at this point you should be thinking about or have already discussed internally who your key partners are, both organizationally within your agency and externally. So the gatekeeper organizations, law enforcement, anybody who's going to have a critical role, the business community. So be forming your advisory council and working with those key partners. And then implementing of that advisory council, how that's going to work, if you're going to have face-to-face meetings, what's the schedule going to be, all the logistics to get folks on board. And I think that you will find in your individual communities that there will be a lot of interest behind this program, especially in the rural communities that you might have more interest from some of the service organizations like the Kiwanis Club or the Lions Club or the Optimist. So really be thinking globally in your community about who will be part of that program, your advisory council program, and how to engage them. Next on the list is discussion about the structure of the program and identifying the hub. And as we talked last time, the hub could look a little different in every community. So there could be a lead agency, obviously maybe the area agency on aging through the ADRC to take the calls, but that also could also mean something different in terms of the training. Maybe the training could be done by another body or a group of volunteers, or maybe your gatekeeper coordinator could do the training as well as kind of overseeing the day-to-day operations. So again, there's a lot of opportunities. You could have any kind of combination of that. So when you're thinking of your work plan, think about what's going to make the most sense for your agency and your community. Then there's the coordinator position. Position description, the budget, different considerations you'll have. We're going to just post a sample description here in a few minutes. We'll also add that to the SUA website as well. But I think you'll find that this position works really well as a bridge builder for your overall ADRC. So in Multnomah County, the way that we're building this position is that person will be doing a lot of outreach and speaking to let people know about our larger organization. Development of an outreach and training plan is critical for success, as well as the training materials and your program evaluation, how you choose to evaluate your program. Fortunately, a lot of the data that you'll be able to get for this program will come directly from the ADRC website, and as Sue-Ann pointed out earlier, there is a step-by-step guide on the ADRC website for training tools to pull that data. Okay, next slide.
So Paul had talked about Plan, Do, Study, Act, and this is going to be an important part. Some of you might already have this technique that you use. There's a lot of information that you can get online about the premise of Plan, Do, Study, Act, but it's just a nice tool to use to look at continuous improvement as you're rolling out a new program or tweaking an existing program. Later on in the webinar, Paul is going to talk about an opportunity that we had to do some continuous improvement for our Gatekeeper program and using the Plan, Do, Study, Act model for that. The key is focus area for the point. This will be some good information for the point person or the coordinator to really understand the premise of continuous improvement, and it implements rapid system improvement. So you can kind of quickly, while the program is rolling out, be tweaking what it is you're doing. This is a great way to also engage your advisory council and gatekeeper champions that you're developing in your community. So those businesses that really embrace the gatekeeper model, this is where you're maybe piloting your training, and they can give you some immediate feedback so you can tweak that training to make it have a better impact or get the message across more clearly. You can, as you're rolling out your training calendar, as you're doing the trainings and you're getting feedback, or during the trainings you're noticing, okay, everybody always seems to ask this question. This question seems to come up in every training. That's where you can maybe then address a particular slide in your PowerPoint presentation or one of the points that you're making during your training, because you noticed that that question always seems to come up, and so clearly I'm not covering that adequately, or the information that I'm providing is not quite hitting home. So it's Plan, Do, Study, Act is a great way to always be thinking about improving your program, and it's something that we do here with many of our programs, including Gatekeeper.
So this is a good follow-up to that. So we've listed up some sample partners on the screen here, the key partners. So again, it sounds like many of you are in that planning stage. So identifying who those folks are. Here's a simple sample list to choose from. You may have others in your community, but those are some key partners, obviously. And the first one on the list, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Adult Protective Services, because that's a critical partner to Gatekeeper. And even though our program has been in place for 27 years, we're always kind of reevaluating our relationship and looking at that. Sometimes as state rules change or there's new direction, we want to make sure that we're in alignment with what APS has. So it's constant communication and making sure that they're part of your advisory council, and also how you're going to partner with them. So I really encourage you to have APS at the table from the very beginning. And then again, what the protocols are going to be, what your memorandum of understanding is going to be with Adult Protective Services. And we're always evaluating that. So for example, we just had conversations with them recently, and they're going to now start providing a little bit of feedback to our ADRC when they don't go out on a call, for example. So if they deem that it's not appropriate for APS, they may assign it to a risk worker or to another body. So we're going to document that in the call module. There's also, Sue-Ann is going to be leading a work group on narration soon, and so that also has impact for Adult Protective Services. So over time, once we have more direction about narration, that may also change in terms of how we're recording calls in the ADRC call module. So I guess the take-home message there is that it's an evolving process, but you want to make sure the partners are there from the very beginning. Another example of that is like developmental disabilities. You're going to get referrals from, for folks with intellectual or developmental disabilities. What's the framework for that? How are those referrals going to be made over to the DD system, for example? What will their follow-up time be? How do you build those connections now if you don't already have them in place? So that's just sort of the starting of the Plan, Do, Study, Act. Now we're going to move to the next slide, where we're going to show you some examples of memorandums of understanding. So I know it's probably really hard to see. Don't worry about that part. We're going to post these again on the SUA website. This is a memo of understanding that we have with 211 Info, and I'm sorry, with mental health. Sorry, with mental health, and just like mental health or 211, excuse me, we're always updating this. So what you have in place, like this example that we have right now, we're in the process of updating this MOU. We don't have the most current that we'd like to show you because we're in the process of updating it. And with the newest one that we have that we don't have available for yet, we're actually meeting with mental health today. We have some really good protocols in there about warm transferring, and if there's some unmet needs from the consumer, how we're going to manage that, and what some of the more philosophical beliefs are that we have as values across our system. So if we have a person where we feel like there's some difficulties or access issues or barriers, we're really spending a lot of extra attention to making sure that we're warm transferring back and forth, so there's that handoff to the mental health call center. We're kind of helping to explain why we're making that referral and making sure that we're staying on the line until the person gets situated with a counselor. So that's just one example of a memo of understanding. And the next one is 211. I jumped the gun. For 211 Info, we've actually had an MOU with them for many years. I think what you have on the screen is our third version of that. And again, with Plan, Do, Study, Act, it gives us the opportunity to redefine those terms and kind of look at that. It's amazing how quickly things can change in a year or two in terms of what we want to have expressed in the memo of understanding or the memorandum of understanding. So it's very helpful for us when, even though this is not specific to Gatekeeper per se, it's more around our helpline ADRC. So for example, with this memorandum of understanding, if 211 is getting calls from an older adult or person with disabilities, they know that we're more of a content expert for those callers, and they're going to be sending those calls over to us, and we'll be able to spend a little bit more time with those callers, and we can ask them more questions and do more of an assessment and see if we can link them to resources. Similarly, if we have someone that's calling us that is not in our target group, let's say we have someone that's 23 years of age, they just lost their job, they need housing resources, they don't have a disability. We think that they can get better served by 211, which is providing more general information. So we're going to warm transfer or get that call over to 211. So again, it's kind of meeting with those partners, determining what those needs are, how we want to staff it together, and also, for example, training. We decided both with mental health and with 211 that cross-training is very important. And this is something, especially like with Adult Protective Services and other MOUs that you'll have, is how do you cross-train each other so you're all kind of on the same page. Okay, next we have implementation of an advisory council. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but it's always good to revisit this because, again, the focus here today is Plan, Do, Study, Act. So by now, hopefully you'll have an understanding of who the stakeholders are in your community and then how you want to bring them together and work on some of those solutions. So, for example, we're asking, who will be the point person to troubleshoot problems when bringing all the parties together? It's usually helpful to have one central person that can be that conduit, both for internal partners and external. So basically that person is going to be a bridge builder, and a lot of this is looking at things from a different lens. So obviously with Gatekeeper, you know, we're going to have our Gatekeeper lens, if you will, that we'll be looking at things through in terms of safety and making sure the person's connected to resources. But we also have to understand it from the other folks' lenses. So the business community, they might say, look, we're really busy. We just want one number to call, and that's kind of what their perspective is. Adult Protective Services will weigh in with their issues. So again, you need somebody who can kind of manage that. And when situations arise, that person can be a good person to help resolve conflict. So again, just asking a lot of questions, assessing, and trying to find some resolution. So it's a process. What will be the process for taking your Gatekeeper calls? Will it be coming in through your ADRC? If calls come in after hours, is there a recorded message? So just be thinking about what that process is, what your intake is going to be like for that. There is a Gatekeeper tab, so those calls can be entered. Some systems might find it easier just to record that on paper and then transfer it over later. Some people are more comfortable directly inputting right into the ADRC call module. So work with your ADRC staff or the folks who will be taking those calls to make sure that they have a comfort level with that. And again, this is where Adult Protective Service comes in terms of your memo of understanding. If we have an Adult Protective Service call, do we want to have the ADRC take that call? And if so, is there anything from the APS lens that we want to be careful to ask when we're getting that call? Or do you want to take some preliminary information and then warm transfer that over to Adult Protective Services? So there's no one way of doing it, but I think the take-home message for us is that we want to make sure all those calls are recorded in the ADRC call module so we can actually kind of follow that over time. How will the data be tracked? So again, as we mentioned earlier, the great thing about the ADRC call module is that we can track that information over time. We can see who's calling us, what industries are calling us, and we can also put some follow-up notes in there as well for those individual calls. And who will be responsible for follow-up? Another key question to ask. And who will train the gatekeepers? As I mentioned earlier, it could be the Gatekeeper Coordinator. It could be a partnership like Washington County has with their law enforcement. They have their Elder Safe program. So it really could be any kind of combination of volunteers, Gatekeeper Coordinator, law enforcement, et cetera. And so now we're going to talk about the structure of the program. So in the middle, we have the ADRC as the main hub. So the ADRC hopefully will be driving this in your county. And as I mentioned earlier, there's going to be a lot of folks who will have input or will want to have input. And it's really important from the very beginning to realize who those stakeholders are and get their input, get their involvement. That way you'll have a solid foundation and you can build from that. So starting from the 12 o'clock position there, we'll kind of work our way around. We have the Area Agency on Aging. So the AAA has a very strong investment in this. If we look at it from the Older Americans Act perspective. Also AAA's, we have advisory council. So maybe there's a role for one or two members of the advisory council to be involved in the structure of that, and plus, of course, AAA staff. So there's that relationship with AAA. Then there's also the Centers for Community Living to make sure that we have representation from either staff or consumers to be part of your group. Plus your advisory councils. In Multnomah County, we have 3 advisory councils. In your counties, you may have something similar, but we have Elders in Action, which is our main advisory council. We have the Multi-Ethnic Action Committee, which is helping us from the diversity perspective. And then we have our Disability Services Advisory Council, DSAC. So again, you may have something very similar. Some of these are sanctioned. You may have a family caregiver group. You may have another advisory council in your community. So realize that you have those folks already, and how do you want to maybe tap into those resources. And then we have senior centers. Senior centers will play a critical role. In our county, our referrals go directly to either Adult Protective Services or to the APD case manager or senior centers. They play a really critical role, especially for the folks over age of 60. And again, a lot of these calls are going to be for folks that we've never heard of before. One of the best practices of this model is it helps us identify people who are not in our system, who are not calling us, but clearly there's some issues going on. So there is a way to sort of work with your senior center partners if they're going to be involved in maybe responding to these calls. We definitely want to get their input from the very beginning. And then we have the options counselors. Those folks may be going out as well and responding, whether it's in the AAA environment or a subcontract agency. So they will obviously have really good feedback. Adult Protective Services, I guess we can't stress that enough. There's sort of a theme here. You definitely want to make sure that APS is at the table. And I want to just highlight here that there's really no right or wrong way to partner with APS. The main thing is to find out how you can work closely together, because a lot of these calls are abuse-related calls, or they're borderline self-neglect, or we don't often know. We just know that there's some warning signs that need to be investigated further. So again, having them at the table and working out those protocols in terms of what goes to APS, and if it doesn't go to APS, then where does it go? Next, we have the gatekeepers themselves. Lynn has used the word champions a few times, both in this call and the past, and I think you'll find that in your community, that there are natural champions that step up who are very excited about this model. We have found here that the utility companies have been a very, very strong partner. They really care about their customers. Financial institutions have been really strong, both banks and credit unions. So finding out who those folks are, having those conversations with them, and seeing if they'd be interested in being involved as part of the structure of your program. Case managers also play a critical role, because they too will probably be going out on these calls. And again, everybody has their unique perspective that they offer, and sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming because you have all these different perspectives, but at the same time, if you don't get their input from the very beginning, then there's going to be a hole, and then you have to figure out, oh my goodness, we didn't think of that. We didn't see it from that perspective. And so what we're trying to stress here is to get as much diversity and involvement from the very beginning. Okay, the coordinator position. So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of this information will be going up on the SUA website. So part of it is to create a position description working within your financial constraints of what the FTE, is it going to be a full-time position, is it going to be half-time, and what the key roles for this position is going to be in terms of partnering with those agencies and partners. And then we listed out some key qualifications and skills that we think are very important for this position to have. One is the volunteer management experience. On our next call, we're going to spend more time on the sustainability aspect of it. We'll address more around the volunteer management, but it's very helpful to have this person have that skill, because especially for sustainability, it helps to have somebody who has experience managing volunteers. Public speaking skills, very important, probably one of the most important skills. And with that comes the ability to freelance your style, or I'm not not freelance your freestyle or flex your style to flex your style with a different organization. So, it might be a 5-minute roll call with law enforcement. So you have people in uniform, guns, in the basement of a police building, or but then you might have an hour with customer service reps in a building downtown. So you have to be able to feel comfortable speaking in either small or large groups and be able to flex your style accordingly to what the gatekeepers need. We also have to have experience, or it'd be helpful to have experience leading an advisory council. So again, I think this person is going to have a critical role in the development of the advisory council, and hopefully it will be a very active advisory council. This council will also make recommendations which will need to be put into place for policies and procedures, so somebody who can work really well with a variety of people. Experience with technology and various training platforms, also very important. We have found over time that we're using technology increasingly with our presentations. Even just this training today we're able to have a webinar and talk with you from folks all over the state. Lynn has done a couple of webinars already, use of PowerPoint in trainings. We've also used SurveyMonkeys for evaluations, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So technology, very important. And then experience with adult learning principles, another key aspect, because we have different learning styles, and it really helps to have somebody who can be very engaging and be aware of those learning styles and build that into the way that they're going to build their curriculum. So thinking about your program's activities, now would be a really good time to think about what the goals would be for your individual coordinator position and how you want to focus your energies. Boy, I'm pretty chatty this morning. Okay, moving over to the position description. So again, as I mentioned earlier, this will be posted on the our plan is to have. This is pretty new to us in terms of for the Gatekeeper expansion, but we see that this person is going to have a critical role in the public information and the community education. So it's 55% of what that person will be doing. And we broke that down into the Gatekeeper outreach and education. We also believe that it would be really important to have a speakers bureau because, again, it's really nice to have that that Gatekeeper lens built in whenever we're doing outreach and events. We always have our Gatekeeper brochures, and it really just helps to have somebody that can maybe be the lead for community education. And then the community outreach piece, which is very similar, but kind of managing the community outreach efforts for us with Gatekeeper and trying to work more in tandem, like with Adult Protective Services and Medicaid, because oftentimes when we're asked to do a presentation, it's not just about Gatekeeper or the ADRC, but how we work together with those other bodies. And then further down, we have the volunteer coordination as well as the record keeping. So again, looking at the ADRC database and doing the report writing that would be necessary for the position. All right. So next up, we have to develop the outreach plan. So here is where we're looking at the low-hanging fruit in your community in terms of what makes sense to start the training. So who are the stakeholders? Those stakeholders at the table have a vested interest. That might be a great way to do some trial runs, to actually do some presentations to make sure that the Gatekeeper coordinator is comfortable in their role, and also to present in front of a receptive audience. So again, use the principles of plan, do, study, act as you think about your structure.
Okay, so I'm going to take over for a little bit here. We're going to talk about developing your training materials. And the materials that we have will be posted up on the State Unit on Aging website. And we're going to go through, there's a couple through the subsequent slides. There's going to be examples of these. And again, all of these will be posted on the website. So your brochure, we have a trifold brochure that we use, and this given out at all the Gatekeeper presentations to different businesses and organizations where we're presenting. Creating your PowerPoint presentation, that's the typical method by which we do our presentations. Not always. Some are smaller groups, and so PowerPoint really doesn't work, but it is a great tool to use. And then to also use if you're doing webinars. I've done webinars when it's with transportation providers, so they have drivers who work various shifts all over the county, and so doing a webinar was the best way that they found to reach all of their drivers, and so I was able to do my training to the drivers for accessible transportation via webinar. Different handouts that we create, tailoring those handouts for the particular industry that we're talking to, that we're providing the training for. The handouts can be, I've done a handout which is just kind of a quick one-pager of around the Gatekeeper program. We have handouts tailored to specific case examples, specific to the industry that we're talking to. Various handouts that can be created to kind of condense down the PowerPoint presentation that they can, that the businesses and agencies have made available to their staff in break rooms or for employees who weren't able to be at the training. We have also developed a quarterly e-newsletter that we send out seasonally electronically as we're collecting over time, as we're collecting email addresses for champion organizations, for the point person at the utility company, and then as well as people who have participated in various Gatekeeper trainings. So that quarterly newsletter is a nice tool to use to have regular touches, regular times where you're reminding your gatekeepers in the community about the program. It's a nice way to put out different updated information, reminders of who to contact if they'd like to have an additional training. All sorts of different information can go out on that newsletter. I mentioned webinars. YouTube training videos is also something that could be developed to get the information out about your program. And then the Train the Trainer materials for a Speakers Bureau. And as Paul mentioned, we'll be talking about that more in session 3 for this series. And keep in mind that all the materials that you develop, all the electronic materials that you develop or handouts, it's great if you can customize them for the type of Gatekeeper organization that you're presenting to. And we have some examples of those things. This is an example of a slide that I have in my PowerPoint presentation when I was doing Gatekeeper training. And it's very easy to customize simply by highlighting. This is a presentation that I did for a bank. And so you just highlight that area when you're talking about where your referrals are coming from by industry. And just highlighting banks and credit unions. 7% of the Gatekeeper referrals that we get are coming from you at the banks and the credit unions. Another easy slide to highlight is when I'm talking about who are gatekeepers in the community. And so this is a slide that you all are gatekeepers. Banks and credit union managers, tellers, and call center staff for the bank or the credit union. So again, this just kind of can help drive home as they're understanding the program and the role that they have in making Gatekeeper referrals. This is another slide that I'll customize in my PowerPoint presentation, and when I'll do a couple of slides about case examples, and I make sure that the case examples that I'm highlighting are specific to the industry that I'm talking to. So here's an example when I'm presenting to transportation providers. This is an example that I've used in the PowerPoint presentation. And then here we have some handouts that are created that are specific case examples. And this is a great way then for the coordinator of the program to really interact and connect with the team who is taking those Gatekeeper calls. And giving them an assignment of jotting down a paragraph or two when they get a Gatekeeper referral, one that's kind of interesting or a unique one, to kind of jot those down so that you can develop your portfolio for case examples. This is a very powerful tool to use when you're doing trainings, when you're out talking to different folks in the community about your program, so that you can really highlight some nice case examples. You can have just a quick paragraph as we have shown here, or you can get more in depth to kind of carry a case through the whole thing. The referral was made, where it was referred to, the follow-up that was done, so that they can kind of get a flavor. Gatekeepers can kind of get a taste for What happens? What type of referrals are we seeing, and what happens to those referrals? So here's an example with TriMet Lyft drivers, so some accessible transportation Gatekeeper referrals we received. Here's an example of some that we received from financial institutions. And again, this is nice to kind of get all of these compiled in one place. As I said, we have a one-page handout that we can use, and then you can also float some of those into your PowerPoint presentations or sprinkle them throughout your dialogue as you're doing a training, a quick stand-up training, or not using your PowerPoint, or if you're doing it in a webinar. It's also nice to feature these in your newsletter. If you are going to do the quarterly e-newsletter, it's nice to feature some of these case examples in that newsletter. They also can be great to use. We've had press that has come about when we have had a Gatekeeper referral that actually made the news when it was a letter carrier who was very proactive and found that the person he delivered mail to had fallen and was in their bathroom for a few days laying on the floor. So when you get that call, which we got several calls when that hit the news, you have some good information to really kind of help promote your program even further. And through the insurance industry, we've got some nice case examples here. Again, all of these will be put up on the State Unit on Aging webpage, so you can really read through these and reference. So as you're developing your program, you too can get a good flavor for the different types of Gatekeeper referrals that we've been receiving over the years. So some important considerations when you are developing your training materials, when you're taking your call to get Gatekeeper referrals, it's very important to steer clear of the jargon and acronyms that we have in our regular environment that we experience all the time. Paul and I have heard time and time again that it can be frustrating when a Gatekeeper is making a call and they're being asked questions that's part of our jargon. That they are being viewed as the complainant. Have you contacted APS? Have you checked out resources in the ADRC? Is this a DV call? They don't understand what those acronyms mean. What's APS? What's DV? Referring to the AAA, are you towing my car? No, it's the Area Agency on Aging. And so they just don't know all of those things. So it's very important that you are conscientious of that and very purposeful when you're creating your printed materials, when your coordinator or a volunteer is going out to do presentations and trainings, and then when that person is taking that Gatekeeper referral, that it's very clean, very easy, and jargon-free and simple for that Gatekeeper. Particularly those Gatekeepers in the community who are not mandatory reporters. So they're not familiar with APS, they're not familiar with the system of abuse and neglect and all of those things. They just had a concern and they're doing their due diligence and want to make that referral quickly and know the person is going to have some follow-up and they can get back to work and get back on the job. So very important considerations to keep in mind. This is an example of some text that we had developed and sent out upon request for employee newsletter or for a church bulletin. So again, this is something that you could develop and have on hand in case back in the day when employees used to actually get their paycheck, we had used it in payroll stuffers as well. That doesn't happen anymore, not as often anyway. But just different things, a quick snippet, a couple of paragraphs that perhaps someone might want to put in their newsletter. We've had it in neighborhood association newsletters, things like that. This is an example of our quarterly or seasonal newsletter that we do. And again, various examples of these will be posted up on the State Unit on Aging website. This is a nice tool. I got some good positive feedback from the Gatekeeper organizations and businesses that were receiving this. And they have passed it on to other people as well, printed it out, made it available in their staff break room, things like that. So this is a quick and easy thing to do, a great place to showcase some of your great calls that you're getting, giving the Gatekeepers more tools or refreshers, and then also reminding them of how to contact you if they want to have an updated training. So good information, quick and easy. It would just be a two-sided document, one-page, two-sided document that was sent out electronically and then also available printed upon request. This is an example of a press release that we've done. Earned media, get some press. We've done this to neighborhood association, or I'm sorry, small neighborhood-based newspapers. A large to have ready to go. This is just a scan of the inside of our trifold brochure that we have. Again, this will be up on the State Unit on Aging website, but just different things. This is a tool that I use when I go out and do a training, so it is given out as a handout during the Gatekeeper trainings. This is an example of a poster that we created to give to our Gatekeeper businesses and organizations if they wanted to have something in their break room, in their staff break room. A nice visual. It was printed out on, it's made to be printed out on larger paper, and they can have this available just as a refresher for their, particularly it was with the utility companies in their staff break room for their call center. So it's important to think about evaluating your program. Part of the Plan, Do, Study, Act is to kind of think about how is it going, what's going well, what needs to be tweaked. So think about how are you going to measure success for your program. What types of activities and outputs and outcomes are you going to be tracking and looking at? Collecting and tracking your Gatekeeper trainings. How many trainings and presentations were done? How many did you do? Did your coordinator do? How many were done by community partners or Gatekeeper champion organizations? So for example, here PGE, our utility company, they have incorporated the Gatekeeper program into their new employee training. When they have new call center staff members that they're training, they train on the Gatekeeper. On the Gatekeeper program. So that's fantastic. So how many times does that happen? How many new employees were trained, new gatekeepers were trained at those utility companies? And then once you develop, if you develop a speakers bureau, how many trainings did your volunteers do? To how many people? So how many gatekeepers are being trained throughout the year? And then looking at the Gatekeeper referrals in the call module. And where are those referrals coming from? How many of those issues went over to Adult Protective Services for their follow-up? How many of those were new to you? They're not already receiving services and support. So collecting that data from RTZ and then kind of teasing that out. What other looks can you do with that data? And we have some examples of some ways that we evaluate our program. This is the post-training evaluation. More recently, we started doing this with SurveyMonkey. So after we would go out and do a training or a presentation at a Gatekeeper organization or business, we would send out a link to a SurveyMonkey and ask that the coordinator, the person that I was in contact with to book that training, that they would send out that link to everyone who attended the training. Got some good information. So this is an example of the paper copy of that survey. And then this is a community education log that we keep here in our work unit. So when we go out, when anyone in our work unit goes out to do any type of training, whether it's a SHIBA training, if it's a training on our veteran services programs, if it's a table or a booth that we have about our ADRC, different things like that, and then also a Gatekeeper training. All of these things are tracked. So we're capturing all the training and community outreach and presentations that we do, including Gatekeeper. And this is how we then keep track of that for the Gatekeeper trainings and presentations that we're doing. How many people were attending, how long was the training or the presentation, all of that is captured in this Excel spreadsheet. And then when we get our information from the RTZ call module about Gatekeeper calls that come in, We take that information then and break it down to determine where did that referral come from, what type of industry. Was it bank or credit union? Was it a utility company? Was it from law enforcement, things like that? And that's how we then get our statistics for what types of referrals we are getting, where they're coming from.
All right. So I know we're getting toward the end, so I want to make sure that we have enough time to go through these next slides. We've been talking about Plan, Do, Study, Act, and I want to give you a recent example that we had where we had 2 senior centers that had overlapping zip codes. So we were using census tract data, and it was causing a lot of confusion for our ADRC staff or case managers, and we found that there was a delay in response time because there was just confusion about that. So we use the Plan, Do, Study, Act principles to work on a solution. So we're going to go to the next slide and show you what that looks like. So basically, we're all in agreement that the current system wasn't working and it was confusing, and that we knew that it caused delay in clients being served. So that's something that we all cared about. So we took some steps there. So we met as a consortium to discuss the possible solutions. So we involved the managers of the senior centers, the case managers, our ADRC staff, and we proposed assigning new referrals to one agency in each shared zip code, so that even though there would be some behind-the-scenes work that might be done by each senior center, we proposed that we would do that. We also realized there might be a potential financial impact on that decision, so we got approval from the directors of each agency, and we piloted that change, and it was very well received. So we were able to kind of implement that policy. And we'll show you a little bit now of what that looks like. So what you have in front of you are the 2 senior centers in question, Hollywood Senior Center and Urban League. And 2 of those zip codes were shared. So we had a conversation, and we just basically said, okay, if it's this zip code, it's going to be Urban League. If it's that zip code, it's going to be Hollywood Senior Center. And they have the ability to reassign it after they get the referral. But to make it very simple for not only the ADRC but other senior centers, it was just a lot clearer for everyone. So we all felt really good about clarifying that policy. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but just it serves as a really good example of the principles that we're talking about today. Make sure that you're meeting regularly with folks, that you're trying something, you're implementing it, and again, if it doesn't work out, you can always change it.
So again, we just want to make sure that you're able to find the materials that are currently posted and those that are coming soon on the State Unit on Aging webpage. So we have a link here. There's a number of ways that you can get to it. This is just a couple of those ways that you're able to find those materials. So the link is there, and then we also have a screenshot here. So this is where the link takes you, and if you see where the arrow is pointing there on the right-hand side, the Gatekeeper program is there. The link that's or the button that's above that area, Agencies on Aging Business, that one you could also get there. And further down on this page, as referenced on this slide, where it says under the latest news on the State Unit on Aging page, there's also a button there. So there's a number of places that you can find the information. You can just put it in. I just put in State Unit on Aging Oregon and Gatekeeper and got to a page and was able to pretty easily find the materials. So there was one question that came in, and Paul, if you want to address this one, the question was around mental health, and that the slide that had all of the circles with ADRC in the middle, and mental health wasn't one of those circles. And the question is around, getting calls that have a mental health component to it. Do those go to APS? Is mental health involved, and how is that?
Yeah, so I'll answer it 2 ways. So one, if the consumer is calling, so let's say it's not Gatekeeper, we're going to make a pretty quick determination while the consumer is on the line and assess whether it needs to go to mental health or adult protective services. Usually, if the consumer is presenting with a mental health issue, we're going to warm transfer it to our mental health call center. With third-party calls, which is what a gatekeeper call is, it's the gatekeeper who is kind of reporting what the issue is. Clearly, if it's an emergent situation, we have protocols for that. But if it's mental health, it's a judgment call on our staff. Sometimes we'll call over to mental health to see if they're an open client in mental health. Otherwise, it will go to Adult Protective Services, and their APS screener will make that determination about where it goes. So there's really no wrong door, but typically those will probably go over in an APS for them to assign.
And Paul, there's another question. If Multnomah County gets a call that sounds like it will be an APS referral, are they all tracked initially in RTZ as a gatekeeper call?
Yes, they are. And then we're also, where the sent to, we're tracking that as Adult Protective Services. So whether there's a substantiated case or it's truly APS or not, that's not what the data is going to tell us, but it will tell us how many calls of the gatekeeper calls that we had, how many were sent over to Adult Protective Services. Does that help?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, good. Okay. Wow. The power of technology. Yeah.
So you'll see, this is Sue Ann. I want to thank Paul and Lynn. We're going to stick around a little bit in case there are more questions. I want to thank both of them. This has just been really great information. You should see their email addresses and their phone numbers on here. Again, I want to mention that Christy Murphy is the State Unit on Aging point person for gatekeepers. So if you have questions, you might also, CC or contact Christy or myself, and then we can help you get to Lynn and Paul also. We will be working really hard to get that information up on the SUA website by the end of next week. And the training videos will also be there with the PowerPoint under the section that says available training. So we will make sure that that gets there. It looks like we have another question coming in.
Hang on, I just lost. So the question is, hang on, where did it go? Well, it was around the State Unit on Aging webpage, and it goes to the family caregiver site, and is that because it hasn't been populated yet? If you scroll down on there, the materials are there.
There are two documents right there under Gatekeeper right now, the replication guide and the what's working. So when you click on the Gatekeeper tab, there are two documents, but there'll be a lot more coming soon. So pretty much everything that you've seen today, the brochure, the job description, the memos of understanding, there'll be at least a dozen or so by the end of next week.
If it's going directly to the family caregiver, we'll take a look at it and make sure that there isn't something wrong.
I think I remember that. And again, if you scroll down, the materials were there when I had looked earlier this week.
Again, you can also find them on their homepage. Instead of going over to the right side to a link, you can look right in the middle as you scroll down that homepage under What's New, and it'll be right there and show you what's there. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay, I don't see any other questions. I want to remind you that we've been recording this, and it'll be on there. It takes us just a few days to get it there. I also want to remind you that there will be an evaluation or a link to a SurveyMonkey for an evaluation that will come out probably in the next half hour or so that you'll get in your emails.
There is another question. If a gatekeeper call goes directly to APS and then they feel it's more appropriately handled by the ADRC, how do they make the referral as gatekeeper?
So I can only speak from our experience here, and we have a no wrong door policy. So one, we're promoting our 24-hour ADRC number to the gatekeepers, and we're asking them to identify themselves as a gatekeeper when they make a call. So that's one way to try to minimize that. If a gatekeeper or a gatekeeper type person is calling Adult Protective Services directly, and they feel like it's not an APS issue, then they would simply warm transfer that call to us, and then we would enter it into the ADRC call module. So there really is no wrong door here. And also just to add a comment to what Sue Ann said, we really do encourage you to complete the survey. We only have one more webinar coming up. The webinar is going to be on sustainability. But if there's anything that you feel like you need additional guidance on, please mention that during your evaluation today so we can be mindful of that and we can include that in the Gatekeeper Sustainability third module.
We are going to take a look at the website. Evidently, we've got Family Caregiver and Gatekeeper on the same page, but the Family Caregiver is at the top, and so you do have to scroll down. It is a little confusing. So we'll take a look at that, but just know for now that the Family Caregiver, you're on the right page and scroll to the bottom, and we'll take a look at that and see if we can help make that a little less confusing. Thanks. We are looking forward to this next one, and we hope that you guys will too. Please don't hesitate to email myself or Christy if you guys have questions, or we'll help you get to Paul and Lynn. We will get all this material up there, which should be really helpful for you. We'll go ahead and keep the webinar open for a couple more minutes in case people have other questions, but we're not seeing anything else come in right now. These are the questions we have are all the same ones. I want to remind you that we do have the webinars on the RTZ system for how to record the calls and how to pull the reports. And you will be getting an email in just the next half hour or so that will ask you to give us some evaluation about this webinar. And we will use that to help us put together the next one. I don't see any more. I think those are all the same. Thanks a lot, everybody.